Welcome to Learn the Word, the daily Bible teaching program of Calvary Chapel of Delta and Pastor Doug McLean. Today, as we continue through 1 Samuel, we're going to join Pastor Doug to see what happened in Israel shortly after Saul was anointed as king. Let's take a look in 1 Samuel chapter 11.
After Saul had been announced publicly as king, there were some who supported him, and there were some who rebelled against the choice and were unhappy about it. And everyone went home. That's where we begin. Look at chapter 11 and verse 1. Then Nahash the Ammonite came up and encamped against Jabesh Gilead. And all the men of Jabesh said to Nahash, "Make a covenant with us, and we will serve you." So the Ammonites came and attacked or surrounded Jabesh. The Ammonites came from the area in Jordan where the capital is, and the capital of Jordan is Ammon. By the way, Ammon named after the Ammonites. That's where they came from. And they had been familiar enemies to Israel. We know that just about 100 years before this event, under the leadership of Jephthah, God's people, Israel, had subdued the Ammonites and won a decisive victory against them. So here they're back again. Now, according to a scroll found in Cave 4 in Qumran, and also according to the ancient historian Josephus, Nahash and the Ammonites had already been attacking Israel and causing problems, beginning down with Reuben in the south on the eastern side of the Jordan River, and then moving up and attacking the area of Gad, and then at this point all the way up to that area that's right near the territory of half of the tribe of Manasseh, Jabesh Gilead. So they were working their way north, and this familiar enemy arrived at Jabesh Gilead. And as they came, the men of Jabesh said, "Look, we'll surrender. Let's cut a deal." They're trying to avoid all the consequences that would come from being conquered, attacked, defeated. They were trying to avoid suffering. So they said, let's cut a deal. They didn't resist. They didn't fight. And most significantly, note that they didn't call out to the Lord. Instead, they said, "Let's cut a deal and we'll serve you." Verse 2, "And Nahash the Ammonite answered them, 'On this condition I will make a covenant with you, that I may put out all your right eyes and bring reproach on all of Israel.'" Man, what a deal, huh? This is terrible. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be painless. He'd cut a deal with them if they would allow him to gouge out their right eyes, to put them through the shame and pain and humiliation, mutilation, to make them permanently handicapped by taking out their right eye. And understand, part of the thinking behind it is that not only would he be taking away depth perception, but also most people being right-handed, you would hold your shield in your left hand and your sword in your right hand. And so it was critical that you could see with your right eye by your shield when you were fighting your enemy. So if you didn't have a right eye, all you had was a left eye, you would have to lower your shield to see the enemy. So they were creating a situation where the men of Jabesh Gilead from this point forward would be weak. They wouldn't be able to resist. They wouldn't be able to cause any problems in the future. No longer a threat. Now, this is particularly interesting to me because the name Nahash means serpent. And certainly in looking at this guy Nahash is operating like the serpent of old, the devil. It's true that if you're not submitting to God, if the Lord is not your king, the devil will show up. And if you're refusing to submit to the Lord as king, as Israel had rejected the Lord as their king, the serpent will show up. James chapter 4, verse 7 tells us that the opposite is true, that if we submit to God and resist the devil, he will flee. James 4:7. But if we're rebellious against the Lord, then certainly the enemy will come and seek to take advantage of that situation. We know the devil is the ultimate terrorist. He works by fear. He works by intimidation. He loves to bring doubt. He loves to present a picture that seems very scary. And he creates these situations to inspire a desperation. And he tempts us to compromise to avoid the trouble, to avoid that situation that he's portrayed before us, because he wants us to surrender. He wants us to serve him. But whenever people give in to the devil, it always comes with a cost, and pain, and shame, and blindness spiritually. So now here in our story, Nahash's terms didn't sit well with the leaders of Jabesh, understandably. And so verse 3 tells us, then the elders of Jabesh said to him, hold off for 7 days, that we may send messengers to all the territory of Israel. And then, if there is no one to save us, we will come out to you. So 7 days to see if anyone would come and help. And if no one did, they figured that losing an eye would be better than losing their life. So just give us 7 days, let us send out messengers. And Nahash agreed. Perhaps he thought no one would come. Or perhaps he was thinking, well, this is great publicity. That if he's seeking to inspire fear and to rule by intimidation, that as the messengers went out and shared everything that was happening, it could certainly inspire fear. Or Israel could respond, and that would give Nahash a greater opportunity for a greater victory. Now again, in looking at this, it's very significant that the people of Jabesh weren't crying out to the Lord to help. They were looking for someone. They were looking for a guy. They were looking for people. They were looking for someone. And that tells us a lot about their spiritual state at this point. It doesn't even come onto their radar. Oh, God, help us. Oh, let's send a messenger. Let's find somebody to help. And so verse 4 tells us, so the messengers came to Gibeah of Saul and told the news in the hearing of the people. And all the people lifted up their voices and wept. And certainly understandable that they wept, and particularly the people of Gibeah. There was a connection between the people of Gibeah and the people of Jabesh Gilead. If you're not familiar with the story, if you go back and read Judges chapter 19 to 21, explore it for yourself, you'll see that there's evidence that there was a connection between the families of Jabesh Gilead and the families of Gibeah. And that when they heard this news, they weren't just hearing about some people. They were hearing about people that might have been their cousins, their nieces, their nephews, their grandparents in this other town that were about to suffer. Horrible, horrible. And again, Nahash, as the serpent of old here, was hoping for this free publicity and hoping to gain greater influence. And certainly it was having an impact on the people. Verse 5 says, now there was Saul coming behind the herd from the field, and Saul said, what troubles the people that they weep? And they told him the words of the men of Jabesh. Now Saul had been anointed privately and then publicly proclaimed king, but nothing had changed immediately. Everyone went home, including Saul, and commendably, he went back to work. He wasn't trying to look for power or authority or position for himself. He just, at this time, had this quality of humility in his life where he just went back to work. And verse 6 tells us, then the Spirit of God came upon Saul when he heard the news, and his anger was greatly aroused. This is the second time the Spirit of God came upon Saul. The first time the Spirit of God came upon him, he prophesied, he spoke for the Lord. This time, as the Spirit came upon him, he was empowered like the judges of old to lead God's people. You can see similar language as the Spirit came upon Othniel in Judges chapter 3, and Gideon in Judges chapter 6, and Jephthah in Judges chapter 11. So the Spirit of God came upon him to empower, not to give him goosebumps, not to give him an emotional experience, but the Spirit of God came upon him to empower him to lead God's people to deal with this difficult situation that was occurring in Jabesh Gilead. And notice that empowered by the Spirit of God, he had the heart of God. Because when he looked at the situation, he was angry about what happened. There are times when it is absolutely right to be angry about things. There are things that anger our Lord. The danger is, and the warning in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26, is that we need to be careful to be angry and not to sin, because sometimes we just can't handle it. And so it's what we do with our anger that can either be right or wrong. Anger in itself can be a very appropriate response to a situation that we see. For example, if you see a child being abused, it's God's heart to be angry about it. When you hear about babies being slaughtered in abortion clinics, it's God's heart to be angry about it. When you hear about injustice or prejudice, it's God's heart to be angry about it. But what do you do with the anger? And we need to be careful that we don't sin in the process and allow anger to drive us. So here, definitely, Saul had the heart of the Lord. He was empowered by the Spirit. And verse 7 tells us, so he took a yoke of oxen and cut them in pieces and sent them throughout all the territory of Israel by the hands of messengers, saying, whoever does not go out with Saul and Samuel to battle, so it shall be done to his oxen. And the fear of the Lord fell upon the people, and they came out with one consent. When he numbered them in Bezek, the children of Israel were 300,000, and the men of Judah 30,000. And again, the message similar to the message that was sent in Judges chapter 19, verse 29, as the Levite sent out a message to all the tribes about what had happened in Gibeah. But in this case, it was to rally the children of Israel to rescue their brothers from their enemy. At this point, it would be wrong to do nothing. There are times when it's wrong to do nothing. If we see that we have a brother who has a need and we turn away from it, how does the love of God abide in us, John said. And so when we see a situation, sometimes it's wrong to do nothing and it's right to take action. And here Saul sends out this message, listen, if you don't come, we're going to wipe out your oxen just like these oxen are wiped out. Also notice that Saul's message included a mention of Samuel. And he did that because not everyone agreed with Saul being king. And Samuel still had influence. So he said, we're going out to battle. And notice, even with the compelling message and the emotional response to what was happening, none of that convinced the people, but rather the fear of the Lord fell upon the people. That the Spirit of God was doing a work where the people had this supernatural sense of the awesomeness, the greatness, the magnitude, the holiness of God, and the fear of the Lord worked on their hearts. And there was a great response. 330,000 soldiers, and they gathered 10 miles west of Jabesh Gilead in Bezek. And then verse 9 tells us, and they said to the messengers who came, thus you shall say to the men of Jabesh Gilead, tomorrow by the time the sun is hot, you shall have help. Then the messengers came and reported it to the men of Jabesh, and they were glad. Boy, were they glad. Therefore the men of Jabesh said, tomorrow we will come out to you, and you may do to us whatever seems good to you. So they sent a deliberately ambiguous message to the Ammonites. They could easily perceive that they were giving up, that they were coming. Okay, I guess you're going to have to put our eyes out. But that indeed was not the case. Verse 11, so it was on the next day that Saul put the people in 3 companies, and they came into the midst of the camp in the morning watch and killed Ammonites until the heat of the day. And it happened that those who survived were scattered, so that no 2 of them were left together. So the attack commenced in the morning, and by noon they had won a great victory. Verse 12, then the people said to Samuel, who is he who said, shall Saul reign over us? Bring the men that we may put them to death. But Saul said, not a man shall be put to death this day, for today the Lord has accomplished salvation in Israel. So with this, the people were ready to execute those who had resisted Saul as king. And the people were recognizing at this point how wrong it was to question the Lord's choice of Saul as king. They recognized that, hey, they were rejecting God's provision. And so they said, we ought to take those guys out. And that gave them an occasion also then to see the grace of the king. Because Saul very wisely said, no, not today. And instead he used this as a point to rally the people together. And please notice that Saul made it clear to everyone that it was the Lord who won the victory. It wasn't the 330,000 soldiers. It was the Lord who accomplished salvation in Israel. It wasn't the new leadership structure. It wasn't their idea to get a king, but it was the Lord. In verse 14, then Samuel said to the people, "Come, let us go to Gilgal and renew the kingdom there." So Samuel, the prophet, uses this as an opportunity to bring the people together, to mark a new beginning, to celebrate God's faithfulness, and to give them a lesson in how they should live for the Lord from this point forward. He said to them, it's time to renew the kingdom. Now, what did he mean by that? Renew the kingdom. Well, in one sense, although Saul had been anointed as king and then publicly declared as king, not everyone had supported that. And so in one sense, this is an opportunity for all the nation to get together and say, yeah, he's our king. So that's a sense of renewal, but that's only part of it. The bigger issue and the main thing is that the people at this point needed to reaffirm that the Lord was their king. That even though they had a king, the Lord was still their king. They needed to reaffirm that. Verse 15, so all the people went to Gilgal, and there they made Saul king before the Lord in Gilgal. There they made sacrifices of peace offerings before the Lord, and there Saul and all the men of Israel rejoiced greatly. So they officially recognized Saul together as king unanimously, and they had this feast, a celebration. Peace offerings were always offerings that the people could eat, as well as parts were burned. So it was like having a barbecue with God. They were enjoying God's presence and celebrating what the Lord had done. And then chapter 12 and verse 1 tells us, now Samuel said to all Israel, indeed, I have heeded your voice and all that you said to me, and have made a king over you. And now here is the king walking before you, and I am old and gray-headed, and look, my sons are with you. I have walked before you from my childhood to this day. So this was Samuel's opportunity to let everyone know that his role as judge had come to a conclusion. It was coming to an end, and that now Saul would be their king. It was a change. And he was using this opportunity to kind of say, all right, I'm done with this part of my ministry, and now Saul's going to take over that part. But notice how he speaks to the people here. There's a little detail that we can read through quickly. But he says, my sons are with you. That's significant because back in 1 Samuel chapter 8, we were told that Saul had made his sons over the people down in Beersheba as a judge. And the people came to Samuel and said, hey, you know what your sons are doing? They're taking bribes. They're perverting justice. They're not doing it right. Here we learn that Samuel responded to what the people said. So the sons were no longer over the people. Now the sons were with the people. So Samuel did something very different than Eli. Remember Eli, when his sons were doing wickedness, he just ignored it. He said, oh, don't do that, but he didn't take action. Samuel, very commendably, took his sons out of that position, and they lost that right to judge. And he says, look, my sons are now with you. And then he continued in verse 3. He said, here I am, witness against me before the people and before his anointed. Whose ox have I taken? Or whose donkey have I taken? Or whom have I cheated? Whom have I oppressed? Or from whose hand have I received any bribe with which to blind my eyes? I will restore it to you. And they said, you have not cheated us or oppressed us, nor have you taken anything from any man's hand. And then he said to them, the Lord is witness against you, and his anointed is witness this day that you have not found anything in my hand. And they answered, he is witness. So Samuel stood before the people and made himself completely vulnerable. He said to the people, have I done anything to wrong you? Have I taken anything from you? If there's anything that I've done wrong, hey, now's the time, just reveal it because I want to resolve it. If I've taken anything, I want to give it back. I want to get it right. What a heart. That's just precious, I think, in the sight of the Lord to see such humility in a man that wanted to just be right with God's people. And in fact, it's the same heart that Paul the Apostle had when he wrote to the Corinthians in 2 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 2. 2 Corinthians 7, verse 2, open your hearts to us. We have wronged no one. We have corrupted no one. We have cheated no one. And that's his heart, to just do things for the Lord and to want to have a good testimony, to want to resolve any wrongs, to not do anything to take away from the Lord or his reputation. Because whenever you serve the Lord, you're not just representing yourself, but you're representing him. And so if you do something to cheat someone, it reflects negatively on the Lord. So Samuel was saying, if I've done anything wrong, I want to make it right. That was Paul's heart. I hope that's always my heart. If I've done anything to wrong anybody here, if I've done anything to offend you, please come to me. I don't want it to be there. I want it to be right. I think we should have that kind of mentality where we're not ever doing things to take away from the Lord's reputation. And so Samuel said, look, I'm not in this for me. I'm not in this for my profit. I'm not a taker. And the people said, you're right. You haven't been a taker. You haven't done anything to take from us. And he was making sure that this was affirmed because he was going to begin to speak in a corrective way to them. And he didn't want them to think there was any personal motive behind it. That he wasn't trying to hold on to a position. That he wasn't trying to manipulate them for his own gain. So the people affirmed it's true. And then, verse 6, Samuel said to the people, it is the Lord who raised up Moses and Aaron and who brought your fathers from the land of Egypt. Now, therefore, stand still that I may reason with you before the Lord concerning all the righteous acts of the Lord, which he did to you and to your fathers. So he begins this history lesson. And he says, look, I'm going to tell you about what the Lord has done for you and for your forefathers. I'm going to tell you about what the Lord, how he's interacted with you and your forefathers. He's saying, look, who the Lord is and what the Lord does is rooted in history. And he began by mentioning that it was the Lord that raised up Moses and Aaron, that the Lord had given them throughout the years faithfully the leaders they needed, and he gave them the freedom that they desired. And he continued in verse 8, he said, when Jacob had gone into Egypt and your fathers cried out to the Lord. If you write in your Bibles, would you underline those words, cried out to the Lord? Then the Lord sent Moses and Aaron, who brought your fathers out of Egypt and made them dwell in this place. And when they forgot, underline that word, forgot, the Lord their God, he sold them into the hand of Sisera, commander of the army of Hazor, into the hand of the Philistines, and into the hand of the king of Moab, and they fought against them. Then they cried out to the Lord. There it is again. Underline it, circle it. They cried out to the Lord and said, we have sinned, because we have forsaken the Lord and served the Baals and Ashtoreths. But now deliver us from the hand of our enemies, and we will serve you. And the Lord sent Jerubbaal, Bedan, Jephthah, and Samuel, and delivered you out of the hand of your enemies on every side, and you dwelt in safety. So this is how the Lord worked for them in the past. And notice in verse 8 and verse 10, Samuel spoke of how they cried out to the Lord. When they were oppressed in Egypt, they cried out to the Lord. Later, when they were oppressed, being disciplined by the Lord and oppressed by their neighbors, we're told they cried out to the Lord. And as a result of them crying out to the Lord, then the Lord sent leaders, Moses and Aaron, and then later this list of judges. Jerubbaal, who is Gideon, Bedan, who most believe is another name for Barak, Jephthah, and Samuel. And the Lord used these judges to deliver them. So the thought is that you look back on your history, Israel, and every time that you cried out to the Lord in your need, the Lord responded by sending a leader through which he brought about the help they need, deliverance, and victory. So they had a historic pattern. The way God worked was established in their history. They cried out to the Lord, and then the Lord sent a man of his choosing, and he rescued them. He made them a nation. He gave them their land. He gave them safety. He did all this work. Every time they cried out to the Lord in their need, he responded by sending them a person who would lead them and bring them into victory. Now notice also in verse 9 that they had forgotten the Lord in the past. And the Lord permitted their enemies then to attack them and to discipline them. So when the attack came and the oppression came, that inspired them to repent, to refocus, to return to the Lord. So what Samuel was developing is their problem in the past was not the Lord's leadership. Their problem in the past was their inability to follow. their failure to be faithful, their failure to look to the Lord. And that was their historic pattern of drifting away, being disciplined, crying out, and the Lord responding.
That's all the time we have for today in this verse-by-verse study through 1 Samuel. If you missed any part of this program, or you'd like to go back and listen to it again, you can find this teaching, as well as Pastor Doug's teachings through the entire Bible, on the Calvary Chapel of Delta mobile app. Just go to the App Store on your smartphone or tablet and search for CC Delta. That's CC Delta to download it for free. And as always, we're going to pick back up here tomorrow. So be sure to join us as we continue to learn the Word.